And welcome everybody to this webcast. Thank you for joining. So I will give you a brief overview of what CleanTech Water is about. So first, overall, what we do is water treatment. What we build is water treatment plant. And you see what we do on the top line of this slide. You see these pictures. Those are the type of technology to customers, and that's most of our business. And that's certainly the area where we're looking to grow in the future. Within our company, it's worthwhile mentioning a few other areas where we have specific expertise or which are a little bit differentiated from our overall technical solutions provision. So one is metal recovery. We still have very deep expertise in metal recovery. That's for historical reasons, and it's an area of expertise that we're looking to apply with customers as well. And we're in discussions with various customers where we don't only treat their wastewater, we're also looking to recover valuable metals from that waste. A second area is graphene membranes. We'll discuss that in a bit more detail in the next slide. And a third one is encapsulated bacteria. These are a way to intensify bacterial processes to treat wastewater, especially nutrients. And we have our own factory where we produce those lenses. You see lenses in this picture here. So we use it in plants like the ones you see on top, but we're also looking to sell that directly into the market as a consumable. So graphene membranes then is something we haven't talked about a lot over the last few years, but it's been a development that's been ongoing for quite a while. And because we expect to be ready for the market soon, meaning in the next, say, 1 year or 1 or 2 years, it's worthwhile to already mentioning it in this webinar. So graphene membranes focus on the micropollutants market. You must have heard that a little bit if you follow the water sector, for example, in PFAS and in pollutants that disrupt hormones, for example. It's a very big market and it's growing fast. And the primary method to take out those pollutants is membranes. And that market is growing very fast as well. So as you see, that will be a couple of $1 billion market. It already is a few $1 billion and it will grow very fast. What we've been doing, what Nomadic has been doing, so Nomadic is 100% owned by CleanTech Water. What Nomadic has been doing is develop a membrane specifically focused on this market based on graphene oxide or graphene. And graphene is this new modern and fancy material that provides a way to improve membranes substantially. What it does, it's allowed for much higher flux, so much higher flow rates at similar energy cost, which is to say you can save substantial energy by using these membranes. And a second very large advantage is that cleaning will be much easier when you use graphene. So that's just the preparation. It is run as a separate company. So we do share obviously expertise, and it's useful that we have a big organization or a sizable organization that talks to the market. But otherwise, this is a separate company in which we plan to put into the market this new type of membranes and get a share of that very large membrane market. So going back sort of to the other business, our main business at the moment, where we sell integrated technology solutions. And there I should introduce Resin technology. We do have a portfolio of technologies, but within that, continuous ion exchange is probably the most important one. And this is a technology that has originally been developed in Russia for taking out or for recovering, mining basically, high value metals. And that technology has been bought by CleanTech a long time back. And since then, we've been developing it for other applications. And that includes other metal applications, so taking out other types of metals, but also very much water treatment. Because ultimately, when you treat water, what you do is you take pollutants out of water. So we use a similar technology to specifically target certain pollutants. And the benefits that creates is because we can be very targeted, we then also create much lower volumes of secondary waste, which is a big problem in the wastewater sector. So we hold a lot of patents and we have a lot of know-how around this resin technology. And also as a final step for the introduction of what we do, perhaps good to start with an example, because we often get the question, what does it look like, your technology solution? What does it mean exactly? So it looks like the picture you see in the back. So it looks like a big processing plant. And you see these big columns in here, the resins are in those columns. So the patents are around these kind of installations, and a lot of our know-how is around these kind of installations. And what we then do is we bring benefits by using a very different method of treating water than existing methods. So in this specific example, which is an example of a plant in Victoria, our benefit is twofold. So one is we reduce the OPEX, and another very important one is that by treating it the way we treat, by specifically targeting certain pollutants and not just all the pollutants, we create solids as a byproduct, but we don't create any saline brines. And that's a big problem in itself. And we'll talk about it a little bit more later. But avoiding these saline brines as a secondary waste, and therefore also avoiding brine ponds, is in many cases sort of the holy grail of these wastewater treatment plants. Because once you create these saline brines, you need to create brine ponds. That's more and more illegal. There's a risk in there, and it's obviously an environmental footprint problem. Our footprint then, so we're looking to promote, or we are promoting our solutions across the world in the areas and in the sectors where they apply the best. We have an office, our head office is in Melbourne. We also have an office in Beijing. We produce the biocleanses I mentioned earlier in our own factory in Tianjin. And then we're working with partners. So we have a number of partners we work with around the world. Specifically worth mentioning perhaps is Multitech, with whom we did a number of projects already. And Nesser, that's a more recent agreement we signed to jointly promote our technologies in the oil and gas sector, mostly again for brines in that sector. Our target market, so where do our solutions apply specifically or most suitably? That's three areas that are all in itself very large, where water treatment plays an important role. One is industrial, and in industrial, these brines that I mentioned earlier are specifically challenging. And for those brines, we have specific solutions to either avoid them or reduce them or clean them, because you need to do something with brines once they're created. And secondly is municipal reuse, which means municipal water treatment is a very common and sort of traditional technology, but you can, instead of putting that water into the sea or into the river, you can reuse that water. So that's the second sector we are focused on. And then finally, a little bit more close to where we come from, so close to our origins, mining, wastewater, and metal recovery, where almost all of our technology solutions apply very well. A little bit more detail on the markets we focused on. So when you look at markets and you go a little bit deeper, you also have to think about what pollutants are we talking about here. So one very important one across the market today is nitrate. And nitrate is becoming increasingly an issue for a number of reasons. One is background nitrate concentrations are increasing. And that's mostly in areas where there's been agriculture for a number of decades now. So you get fertilizers, these fertilizers go into the ground. And over time, that slowly increases nitrate background concentrations. At the same time, we have the opposite trend, which is that governments and science really are getting increasingly concerned about even low levels of nitrate. And that mimics a bit the discussion we're seeing for all kinds of other micropollutants. There's an increasing realization that increasing background concentrations, even if they're small, of certain pollutants are actually fairly damaging to our health. So these two trends, underlying growth of nitrate and stricter regulation, creates an issue in many places, because suddenly you need to remove these final trace elements or trace amounts of nitrate. And traditional methods are not very good at that. Traditional biology can remove some of the nitrate, but cannot remove the final amounts. So our technology, and specifically our BioCleanse and our BioNext technology, is very suitable to remove those last amounts of nitrate in an efficient way. Municipal, I just mentioned, is an important sector for us. Municipal effluent it's actually a bit of a waste of resources that everywhere around the world we treat municipal wastewater. We treat it to a very high quality level and then we dispose of it. So in areas where there's drought or where there's a shortage of water, what you really want to do is take that water, further treat it, and then reuse it. And that's exactly what's happening in countries that are very advanced in water treatment. So Israel is a great example. In Singapore, they also have recognized this as the easiest and quickest way to increase water availability. And the rest of the world, especially the areas that are dry, like Southern Europe, California and other places in the US and also Australia are recognizing this. We should all be doing that when there's water shortages. Is the first thing to do is look at municipal effluent. So we're doing that. We have a technology that's very suitable for that, and we're in fact working today with Townsville, where we've been selected in a tender to provide a large-scale recycling plant to do exactly that. And then finally, mining. Mining is a very diverse field, of course, with many water challenges. One is water shortages, which is often a problem. Another big challenge is, of course, the wastewater or the processed water you get out of mines or out of mine processing tend to be very hard to treat. And in mining, you have the example of these brine ponds or these tailings with a lot of liquid in it that provides a real safety risk and an environmental risk. So it's a sector we feel very comfortable because the problems are challenging and because our technology solutions are very much focused on solving those problems. So that brings us now to our current set of technology solutions. These solutions are mostly applied at large scale around the world already in our own applications because they're all unique. And we're also running multiple pilots for many of those solutions at the moment. So each of these things does a different thing. I'm not going into detail. You can perhaps read it here and otherwise look at our website. And the reason we cover a spectrum of solutions is because that's often what the customer requires. So it's often very hard to take one of those and go to a customer because that becomes a very binary discussion. But more often than not, a customer needs two of those solutions together, and we're able to help customers with their problems and provide the optimal solution. And some recent case examples. So on the top, you see 3 plants we have handed over or are close to be handed over. They're all sort of in the mining and brine treatment sector, 2 of the sectors that I mentioned earlier. And then on the bottom, you see 3 contracts we've signed recently. That's actually not true. The 2 on the bottom are ones we signed recently. We signed 3 contracts since January this year. And the one on the left lower corner is the example from Townsville that I mentioned before. That's a project we basically started where we've done detailed design and where we're still in discussion on the EPC contract for the large-scale plant to build the actual large-scale plant. Also on size, you can see the numbers, right? What we typically see is that projects that we focus on will be 3 to 4 million. Some are a bit smaller here, but some of them are in their next phase or have some expansion to it. So you will typically see that the lowest size is really around 1.5 to 2 million. And that goes up to 4 or 5 typically, but you do have much larger projects. So you have projects of 50 million, 20 million, 25 million. They're more rare, but they're certainly there for almost all of our solutions. So that brings us to our strategy. And I think the introduction I just gave has probably given you hopefully given you a clear picture already of the strategy. The core of our strategy is really built around our set of innovative technologies. That's what we've been working on a lot over the last years to develop and to further improve. And that's also the basis on which we're winning projects and on which we're very confident about our prospect for future growth. Secondly, we do, of course, try to match those solutions with problems. And those problems are very much right now in large sectors. And that's why we go after them. And that's also the pneumatic geomembranes is a good example of that. That's partly driven by an observation that the market needs a better solution to an existing problem. And then finally, our business model. Right now, we provide these integrated technology solutions, these integrated plants that you've seen in some of the pictures. But while we're installing that, we are building a consumables business on the back of that. And that's because almost all of our plants include those resins or the BioCleanse. And obviously, if we get our geomembranes in market, we will also have another consumable business in that product. And then thirdly, there's BOT, which some people might have heard of. In some countries, that's very popular already, sometimes called water as a service. It's certainly something we're also interested in. It logically follows a little bit having a bigger footprint around the world. So you first want your plants being operating in various sectors and in various regions. And on the back of that, you would then typically engage with customers that are looking for a different solution and looking to you to invest and then pay you per ton of water treated or per ton of water recycled. And then finally, to put it back into context, the company CleanTeQ obviously has a long history. And what you can see is that we've been involved in various water treatment projects and plants a long time ago already. But over the last decade, you could say that the focus really has been a lot on the Sunrise project that many of you listeners will know very well, to get it off the ground. And around 2007, we also looked at our water portfolio and reoriented that towards the model we're now pursuing, which is provide integrated technology solutions. So we did that by putting our patents together, also improving some areas, doing more testing and piloting, and even buying some additional patents we felt fitted very well with our current portfolio. And on the back of that, we then signed our first commercial sized contracts to build those plants. And that's what we've been doing mostly over the last 5 years, building these plants, making sure they work, making sure customers are satisfied. And it's only on the back of that that we started to build our commercial team, so a proper dedicated commercial team. So we've had that in place now for almost 2 years in Australia. We're only just building that in China. And this is now going to provide the basis on which we're looking forward to the next few years and looking forward to our phase of growth. And we're confident about that. We do honestly believe that our technology portfolio is unique in the world. There will be very few companies, there are very few companies in the world that are in water treatment that have such a broad portfolio of innovative solutions that have been tested and tried in the market. And we're looking forward to you existing shareholders and new shareholders to join us on this path. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Willem. That's a pretty good overview for shareholders who are new to the story and for shareholders who have been part of the previously merged group. We've got some good questions coming through here from the audience. The first one I think is a good one for you. How do you see CleanTeQ Water protecting its IP in the Chinese market? Because we know there's often a lot of competition in that area. And following from that, who do you see as your competitors in the market and where you sit in that number?
Yes. Okay. So to tackle the first question first, IP is always a point of great attention, of course. So in China, and I would say it's a problem everywhere, not just China, but certainly in China, it tends to be very pressing. There's a number of ways we do that in. The first one is for China specifically, is that a lot of the IP and the knowledge is still with our people in Australia. A second one is that a lot of the knowledge and the know-how you build is built over many, many years. So we have a long history, but some of our key experts have like decades of experience with things like resin exchange. And that's very hard to mimic, right? Because our plants are semi-customized. So we standardize the general flow sheet and we standardize certain components, but you always need some customization, and that protects us a lot because it means that in every customization, you need that expertise that is hard to copy. And then finally, a specific way to protect ourselves is also the fact that in many of our solutions, we have consumables like the resins and the BioCleanse, and in the future, our geomembranes, where we protect also some of those manufacturing steps. And again, that makes it harder to copy. Sorry, maybe a final one, which is, I think, the ultimate way to protect yourself against anyone, is to continue to innovate. And the water sector is very much that. The water sector is never standing still. And we are very much in that same way, continuing to improve our solution. So if someone would have copied us and has gone through all the length of putting down a pilot and a large-scale plant, we would have moved ahead with an improved solution. Great, that's a long answer, Peter. Shall I take the second one, or?
Yeah, that's right. No, these are the questions, but I think, as you described, CleanTeQ Water has been around for a considerable amount of time now to establish itself as an operator with a good portfolio of projects under its belt and a suite of technologies, which, as you said today, can be integrated into those projects. And on that, I suppose, municipal effluent projects, how significant is that to your future, and where do you see those sort of projects as growth potential in the next few years?
So municipal effluent is a very good question. Municipal effluent is in a way the biggest sector, or at least the biggest potential sector, because it's everywhere. So if everywhere people will be serious about reusing that, and treating that, that could be a very, very big sector. The challenge is there, competition is harder because a lot of the bigger companies, the biggest companies, are into that market as well, whereas a market like mining tends to have a little bit more specialized players. So for our municipal business, we're a little bit more geographically focused, so we won't go to Africa or South America to do that. We're focused on Australia, China, and the US. And in there, we see that as a very increasing market on the back of our special technology. So in China and the US, you have nitrate as a specific problem. So I had a slide where I discussed that. And in that specific market, we feel that our solution is very unique. But for that, we do look for partners in those markets, because municipal is a little bit more locals in the sense that the municipalities tend to work with local companies very much so. So we are looking for partners in those markets, but then we are certainly hoping for substantial growth in that market as well.
Okay, and you'd want to see those municipal partners go to the shelf and go to the tried and tested companies, and you want to be right up there amongst them. So following from that, where do you see the near-term opportunities for the company and then some longer-term opportunity growth?
Near term, certainly be building on what we've built over the last years, which is the mining and the brine treatment. And in the end, near-term opportunities tend to follow your first installation. So what we've seen now, we've had these 3 plants we delivered in the mining and metal processing sector. And there you see immediate follow-up. So it becomes much easier to sell after you sold your first few. A second near time or slightly longer would be China, where we're building our first large-scale demonstration plant for nitrate removal. And that would in itself then, in our expectation, generate a lot of follow-up requests and growth. And we already see that. And perhaps a longer term, it's good perhaps to mention then again, refer back to the geomembranes. That would be an obvious example where we see a lot of potential in the slightly longer term. Another example would be the BioCleanse, for example, where we're now using that in our own projects. We're already talking to agents and other people that can then take that product once we've proven it in our first plants and sell it to third parties directly, which can then accelerate the growth of that revenue.
Okay, there's a few questions coming through about the demerger, which is a good one to address. It's freed up Cleantech Water to be its own entity and look after its own financials, as it always did, I guess. But now you have the ability to raise capital and go forward. How have you seen the demerger as advantageous, and what does it mean to you in terms of providing opportunities for growth? And I guess I think we've listed, the company's now listed with about $16 million in cash. How are you feeling as a company set up financially going forward as well?
Yes. First, the cash situation. So we are in a very comfortable situation to have enough cash. So that covers all our existing obligations, and it allows us to really focus on that growth and not immediately being forced to look for funding. So that's been a very good situation to start with. The demerger itself, I think, is very beneficial. It's the right moment. Right, it's the right moment because we've seen Sunrise growing and really become a project that needs a lot of attention in itself. And we've seen the same thing happening in water. So this is the right moment to grow. We're ready for it. And the benefits this will now deliver is obviously on the shareholder side. So it allows us to attract shareholders that might not be allowed or might be hesitant to invest in a company that's also a mine, and obviously vice versa. But for us, that's a big benefit. So the whole ESG area and the ESG investors become potentially attracted to us. And the second thing, it provides us with a level of flexibility that especially in the next growth phase will be very advantageous. Because what you do in water, especially if you try to grow in areas, in other geographies, like the US, as I mentioned, like South America, and especially when it's sectors like municipal, we tend to be a little bit local, you do want to work with partners. And that ability to form partnerships, potentially even form like more advanced partnerships like JVs, is usually enhanced when we are our own company with our own set of shareholders. So that provides a lot of benefits, we feel. So we're very happy we succeeded this.
And probably just, there's a few questions here which have come through, which I think a bit more specific. And if those people would like to email them to myself, I can pass them on. This was just to finish off with a message to shareholders. We've got a good number joined in here today, Willem. The outlook of the pipeline and news flow, that just a general overview of the pipeline and of work you're looking at the moment and what shareholders can look forward to over coming months.
Yes, we have a very large pipeline. So we although we only just started with our commercial team, it has attracted and we have generated a lot of interest. So that makes me and it makes us as a company very, very hopeful. The actual conversion into project, I'm also very hopeful that that is going to happen in the next few months. But it's always a little bit of a hard to predict process. What you tend to have with water project, as many probably know, there's relatively long timelines for it. So you tend to have long discussions, you tend to have tenders, which is in itself a process. Then you often have a testing phase, and then you get the big project. So we're now building up the basis to then be able to generate that continuous growth going forward. So I cannot say specifically which month and which date we will start seeing the next project coming across the line, but certainly from what we're seeing in our current pipeline, the future looks very hopeful.
And Willem, just for any small shareholders, just the nature of the buyback underway, can you just give a quick overview of that?
That's better to address that by email, and then we can get back to you on that. Okay,
terrific. So there's a few questions there. Please send them through to me at peter@nwrcommunications.com.au, or send them through to the relevant expert at CleanTeQ Water. But in the meantime, I thank you all for joining us today. Thanks, Willem, for walking us through the presentation on another successful day on the market for CleanTeQ, an exciting time as the company moves forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.